Hey there, friend. Where are you listening from tonight? Maybe you're in a small town somewhere in the Midwest, or sitting on your porch on the East Coast, wrapped in a favorite old blanket. Or maybe you're near one of the places we're going to talk about. Maybe Boston's harbor is just down the road. Or maybe you've walked through a field once plowed by medieval hands. Long before your own feet touch this land, wherever you are, let's take a moment to settle in. Breathe slowly. Let the day's worries melt away. Because tonight, I'd like to take you on a journey. Not just in your mind, but right into the very heart of the past. Let's imagine together that we're stepping back in time, to the exact moments and places where these stories first unfolded. We'll start in a humble medieval hut, where peasants huddled under scratchy blankets, the wind whistling through cracks in the walls, like an old ghost telling secrets. We'll feel the flicker of the hearth fire that was the only thing standing between life and the endless winter night. Then we'll walk straight into the candlelit court of Boleyn, where every glance and whispered word could shift the fate of an entire kingdom. Maybe you'll feel the cold stones of the tower beneath your feet, or the weight of a crown that was never truly safe to wear. From there, we'll sail across the choppy seas to Boston Harbor, right on the edge of revolution. If you're listening from there tonight, I hope you can almost smell the salt air. Feel the weight of those wooden crates of tea crashing into the dark water, each splash a promise of freedom that would echo around the world. And then, friend, we'll leave the familiar behind and journey to the sunbaked desert of Caral, a city so ancient that even the pyramids were still dreams when these people built their temples and plazas. Each stone laid by hands that believed in community more than conquest. So wherever you're listening from, come closer. Let these old stories breathe new life tonight. Let's stand in the cold with the peasants, walk the halls with the queen, toss the tea into the harbor, and feel the sun warm the stones of Caral. Find your favorite chair tonight. Friend, wrap up in a soft blanket, maybe with a cup of something warm in hand. The world can wait. There's a quiet story I'd like to share with you. If you enjoy this gentle tale, consider following along or leaving a comment about where you're listening from. It's always a comfort, knowing we're connected across the miles. So take a slow breath. Let the worries of your day slip away. In this quiet space, under the hush of night, we'll step into the lives of those who came before us. Men and women who faced winters so bitter that even the stars seemed to shiver in the sky. Tonight, we begin with the medieval peasants, those humble souls who lived not in castles, but in small wooden huts that creaked and groaned with every gust of wind. Imagine it now, a low, drafty cabin standing in the middle of a snowy yard. Its walls, made of wattle and daub, sticks crossed like a basket, plastered with mud and straw. No insulation, no glass windows, a single door, hung by iron nails and sheer willpower, rattles under the weight of winter. Outside, the cold howls like an old dog, nipping at the corners of the hut, searching for a way in. Inside, a thin fire flickers in the hearth, sending out more smoke than heat. A few rough-hewn benches, a table that's seen better days, and maybe, if fortune smiles, a bed of straw tucked in a corner. No luxury here, no soft mattress or cozy pillows, just sacks stuffed with hay and the stubborn warmth of bodies pressed close together. They slept in layers. These peasants, woolen tunics that itched like 1,000 nettles, cloaks that smelled of goats and damp earth. Boots, if they had them, were little more than scraps of leather and hope. At night, they layered everything they owned, turning themselves into walking bundles of wool and rags. But it was never enough. The cold found its way in. No matter how many gaps were stuffed with moss or rags, the wind pushed through the cracks in the walls, a persistent whisper that chilled bones and stole sleep. Every breath hung in the air, small white clouds that quickly vanished. Every creak of the wooden beams was a reminder that the world outside was waiting to seep in. In these nights, comfort was not a featherbed or a downy quilt. Comfort was a small ember glowing in the hearth, a promise of warmth that could mean the difference between life and death. The hearth was more than just a place to cook or boil water. It was the beating heart of the home. Children curled near it, toes wiggling in the meager heat. Mothers tended the coals with care, banking them under ash to keep them alive until morning. And if you listened closely, you could hear the music of survival, the crackle of the fire, the soft sigh of breath as families huddled close. The gentle murmur of prayer, for warmth, for life, for one more day. It was a life of small miracles, waking up with all your fingers still yours, finding a bit of turnip to add to the morning's stew, hearing the rooster crow and knowing you'd survived another long, frozen night, but even in the harshest cold, there was a certain kind of beauty, the hush of the snow, the glow of the firelight on rough wooden walls, the way a shared blanket could turn strangers into kin. Tonight, as you listen to this tale, let yourself drift back in time. Feel the weight of the cold, the crackle of the fire. Imagine the smell of smoke and wool, the taste of simple porridge, and know that within these humble homes, hope burned as bright as any hearth. Maybe there's a quiet lesson here, tucked between the lines of history, that even in the face of biting winds and endless snow, there is warmth to be found in kindness, in resilience, in the simple act of gathering close. So let this story be a soft place to rest tonight. Let your eyes close if they grow heavy, knowing that somewhere, in the quiet glow of a distant fire, the memory of those ancient nights still flickers on. If you feel a little sleepy, let it come. Leave me a note if you like, about your favorite winter memory or the coziest corner of your home. Let's keep these quiet stories alive together. One ember, one breath, one gentle night at a time. Find your softest blanket tonight, friend, and pull it close, because tonight we'll talk about the humble blanket, that faithful shield against the biting cold of a medieval winter. If you're wrapped up in your own cozy quilt right now, take a moment to appreciate the quiet luxury of it. And if you enjoy these gentle stories, consider sharing them with a friend or leaving a little note about where you're listening from. It's always comforting to know we're not alone in the dark. Now, imagine a medieval peasant's blanket. It wasn't the plush fleece you might have draped over your couch, nor the crisp cotton of a fresh duvet. No, these blankets were woven from coarse wool, thick and scratchy against the skin. Sometimes they were patched and repatched until they looked more like a quilt of memories than a single piece of cloth. They smelled of smoke and sheep, the earthy perfume of a life lived close to the land. But to those who wrapped themselves in their heavy folds each night, they were more than mere fabric. They were hope. They were a barrier against the wind that prowled outside like a hungry wolf. A promise that maybe, just maybe, they'd wake up with toes still warm enough to wiggle. In the small huts scattered across frost-bitten fields, families huddled close beneath those blankets, children tucked in like little chicks, cheeks rosy from the cold, elders murmuring quiet prayers as they pulled the covers up to their chins. The thick wool did its best to hold in every precious degree of warmth, but the blankets alone were not enough. On the coldest nights, families became living insulation, pressed so close that each breath shared warmth. A mother's arm wrapped around a child, a father's shoulder resting against his brother's, all of them wrapped in a single blanket, bodies woven together like the threads in the fabric. These moments were quiet, tender, the hush of sleep, the soft rhythm of breathing, the occasional sigh as someone shifted, seeking a warmer patch or a softer bit of straw beneath their bones, and always the faint crackle of the fire, a gentle reminder that life still burned. Even in the darkest hours, in the morning, the blankets were stiff with cold, heavy with the dew of a night spent fighting off winter's icy fingers. Yet they were treasures. Each patch, each worn corner spoke of survival, of long nights weathered together, of shared laughter and quiet tears beneath their folds. Today, we might look at a simple blanket and think little of it. A decoration for the couch, a splash of colour in a room. But for those medieval peasants, it was a lifeline, a shield, a comfort, a piece of home to hold on to when the world outside threatened to swallow them whole. Maybe there's something to learn here, that warmth is not just in the cloth, but in the people we share it with, that even the roughest blanket can feel like a soft embrace when wrapped around someone you love. So as you snuggle under your blanket tonight, let this story settle in your mind like a quiet song. Think of the families who once curled together beneath wool and hope, and know that in every thread there is a whisper of their courage, a memory of their strength. If you'd like, tell me about the coziest blanket you've ever known, or the first time you felt safe and warm on a winter's night. I'd love to hear your story, because in the end, it's the shared warmth that matters most. Let's keep these quiet memories alive together, one blanket, one breath, one soft night at a time. Find yourself a warm spot. Friend, a thick blanket wrapped around your shoulders, a cup of tea steaming gently in your hands. Tonight, I'd like you to imagine a different warmth, one that glowed in the coldest corners of medieval life. And if these soft embers of stories find their way to you, maybe you'll leave me a note or share it with someone who might need a gentle glow tonight. The hearth was everything. In those ancient homes of wattle and daub, where the walls trembled with each gust of winter wind, the hearth was the fragile heart that kept everyone alive. No grand fireplace with a polished mantle, just a rough ring of stones or a shallow pit, blackened by years of smoke and soot, a stubborn little fire flickering against the cold. It was the place where mothers stirred thin stews, coaxing every last bit of flavour from turnips and roots, where fathers, shoulders stooped from long days in frozen fields, held out cracked hands to the warmth. Children huddled close, their noses pink and running, their small bodies pressed together in a silent pact. Stay close, stay warm. The smoke was constant. It curled and twisted, seeping into every rough wool cloak and every woven blanket. It stung the eyes, it clawed at throats, but no one wished it gone. Because smoke meant fire, and fire meant life. Even on the longest nights, the hearth never rested. One soul always stayed awake. A grandmother with silver hair and gentle fingers, or a child still too small to work the fields, but big enough to feed the flames. They would kneel on the packed dirt floor, poking the coals, adding scraps of wood and bits of dried moss. The crackle and pop of burning logs was a lullaby, each snap a soft reminder that life still burned. But there were nights when the fire faltered. A cold gust would slip through the door, or wet logs would hiss and sputter out. Then the household would rouse, bleary-eyed and silent, all of them turning to the fire as if to an ailing friend. They'd gather around it, each breath a small prayer, each hand feeding twigs and dry rushes, coaxing the embers back to life. For a peasant, losing the fire was more than losing heat. It was an invitation to the dark, to the endless winter that pressed close to their thin walls. No one spoke of it, but they all knew the truth. Without that glow, the cold would claim them before morning. So they learned to bank the fire. Before sleep, they covered the coals with ash, tucking them in like children under blankets. The ash, pale and soft, held the heat close, hid it from the greedy drafts. In the morning, with careful hands, they'd brush it aside, hoping to find the glow still alive beneath. And when the first tiny spark flared back to life, it was like a blessing whispered into the dawn. In those hours by the fire, stories were shared, not grand tales of kings and battles, but the quiet stories of the village. How old May had once seen a shooting star from the doorway, how little Tom's first tooth fell into the stew pot. Laughter, muffled by scarves, would drift up into the smoky air. Children's eyes grew heavy, lids drooping as the warmth seeped into their bones. The firelight played across their faces, soft and golden, turning the hard lines of their days into gentle curves. In that glow, the world outside, the icy fields, the frozen streams, seemed to pause. Here, in the circle of warmth, life was simple. Feed the fire, feed the family, hold each other close. They used what they had. If wood was scarce, they burned peat or dried cow dung. If the wind howled too hard, they pressed rags and moss into every crack in the walls. The children learned early to listen for the sound of the wind, to smell the change in the air that meant snow was coming. They knew to gather close to the hearth, to wrap up in old blankets that smelled of smoke and goat. On some nights, neighbours might slip in, shaking snow from their cloaks, bringing news from beyond the yard. They'd sit by the fire, passing around a chipped mug of ale, sharing quiet laughter and old songs. In the flicker of the flames, each face was lined with care. Each voice was soft with the knowledge of how precious that warmth truly was. And always, the fire was the centre, the circle of life drawn in orange and gold. Children would lean against their mother's legs, their small fingers tracing patterns in the dirt floor. Fathers would stare into the embers, lost in thoughts of spring planting or a neighbour's good harvest. And the old ones, with faces carved by years, would hum softly, their voices blending with the hiss and crackle of the logs. Maybe there's a lesson there, friend, that in the darkest nights, it's not the size of the fire that matters. It's the way we gather close around it, the way we share the warmth, the way we keep the glow alive for one another. So tonight, let this story be a small hearth for you, a place to rest, to remember that even in the coldest nights, there is always a chance to breathe warmth back to life. And if it touches you, if it stirs a memory of your own fires, tell me about it. Let's keep these quiet embers glowing together, one soft breath at a time. Wrap yourself a little tighter tonight. Friend, the night air outside is sharp, and I'd like to take you deeper into this world, to the place where hands meet earth, where lives are built one furrow at a time. If these words find you, I hope you'll share a memory of your own, or leave a thought in the quiet glow of these stories. They rose before the sun, those men and women of the fields, long before the sky began to pale. They were up, their feet feeling for boots worn soft as old leather. their breath clouding in the bitter air. The fields were silent in the dark, the soil hard as iron under a thin crust of frost. They took up their tools, wooden-handled, smooth from years of use, and set to work. Each stroke of the hoe, each push of the spade was an act of faith. They knew that somewhere beneath that stubborn earth, life waited, seeds tucked in tight, roots holding fast. Their hands told the story, calloused and cracked, brown with dirt that no washing could truly banish. Fingernails rimmed with soil, knuckles split from the cold. They wore those marks like medals, each scar a quiet testament to the winter that had passed. The harvest that would come, no one complained. There was no use in complaint. The earth didn't listen, and neither did the wind, so they learned to work in silence. The only sounds the scrape of iron, the soft grunts of effort, the quiet sigh of breath. But there was comfort in that rhythm, in the steady swing of an axe, the patient turning of the soil. The children learned it, too, their small bodies mimicking the grown-ups, eyes wide and solemn. They carried buckets of water from the well, fetched straw for the cows, wiped their runny noses on sleeves rough as burlap. Inside the cottages, the hearths glowed, bread rose slow and patient in the warmth, porridge bubbled in blackened pots, thick and filling. When the workers came in from the cold, their shoulders dusted white with frost. The smell of that bread and the sweet, nutty scent of roasted grains was a promise that there was something waiting, something to keep them moving through the long days. They sang sometimes, soft songs that wove through the air like the smoke from the chimney. Not grand hymns or ballads of knights and dragons, just work songs, wordless hums that matched the beat of the hoe in the dirt. Songs that said, "We're here, we're together." In those rough winter months, even the smallest blessings mattered. A piece of honeycomb shared among the children, a handful of dried berries saved for a festival day, the soft, comforting weight of a woolen shawl passed down from grandmother to mother to daughter. At night, the tiredness settled deep, bones ached, backs bent under the weight of a world built by hand. Yet there was peace in that ache, the peace of knowing that tomorrow would come, and they would rise again. The work was hard, but it was theirs. The soil might be cold and unyielding, but it belonged to them, and they to it. Maybe, friend, there's something to learn from those calloused hands, that the quiet work of each day, the small, patient tasks we do for each other, these are the foundations that hold us through the fiercest winters. It's not the grand gestures that keep the cold away, but the steady glow of kindness and care. So let your feet find their place by the hearth tonight. Let the crackle of the fire and the hush of these old songs warm you. And if you'd like, leave me a note. Tell me what small tasks bring you peace. Let's keep these gentle stories alive, one hand in the soil at a time. Find yourself a soft chair. Friend, let the shadows gather while the fire flickers. Tonight, we're stepping inside the heart of those cottages, inside, where life hummed slow and warm against the winter's hush. And if you're listening, let me know. What's your favourite comfort food when the night is cold? The cottage was small, a single room under a thatched roof that creaked when the wind sang. But it was enough to hold the quiet laughter of children, the soft murmurs of grown-ups bent over pots and bowls, enough to gather them close against the cold. The hearth was the centre of it all, a low fire, fed with careful handfuls of wood or dried peat, smoke curling slow toward the rafters. Sometimes, the wind snatched at the thatch, sent the smoke back down to swirl around them. No one minded much, better smoky air than no heat at all. They cooked in heavy iron pots, blackened with age, passed down like family heirlooms. Thick stews bubbled, filled with whatever the earth had given, turnips, onions, bits of salted meat if the family had been lucky. The scent of it, rich and earthy, was a comfort that sank deep into tired bones. Bread, too, always bread. Flat rounds of coarse brown dough, baked on hot stones at the edge of the fire. It was rough, chewy, but it filled bellies and lifted spirits. When the bread was torn apart and passed around, there was a hush, a quiet gratitude that didn't need words. Children sat cross-legged near the hearth, small hands wrapped around wooden bowls. The heat of the soup seeped into their fingers, chasing away the bite of winter. They slurped and smiled, cheeks rosy, eyes bright. Even the smallest mouthful was savoured, because every bite was a promise. Tomorrow would come, and there would be another meal. The grown-ups talked in low voices, not about kings or wars, but about the weather, the fields, the stubborn cow who wouldn't stand still to be milked. Little jokes, soft laughter. These were the sounds that made the night feel less long. Sometimes a neighbor would wander in, bringing news or a handful of dried herbs. They'd share a bench, a bowl, a few quiet words. The cold outside didn't matter so much when you were wrapped in the warmth of voices, of community. At the end of the meal, there was always tea or something like it. A pot of hot water, steeped with dried leaves, mint or yarrow, anything to bring a hint of green to the grey of winter. The steam rose in soft clouds, carrying the scent of the earth in bloom. For a few precious minutes, it felt like spring had come early. And then the bowls were washed with melted snow, stacked in neat piles by the hearth. The children curled up on straw pallets, older ones with a scrap of blanket, younger ones nestled close to mother's side. The grown-ups lingered, talking in the hush. The fire crackled low, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. Maybe, friend, there's something in that simple meal, a lesson we might still carry. That warmth isn't just from the fire, but from the hands that share it. That the best feast isn't measured by silver spoons or fine plates, but by the quiet comfort of being fed together. So tonight, if the world feels cold, I hope you'll remember those old kitchens, the rough bread, the bubbling stew, the soft murmur of voices in the dark. And if you have a memory like that, a meal that warmed you more than the food alone, I'd love to hear it. Leave a note, a whisper of your own kitchen's warmth. Let's keep these soft stories alive. One meal at a time. Find your favorite blanket, friend. Pull it tight around your shoulders and let the chill of the night slip away. Tonight, we'll wander back in time to a world where warmth was a treasure, shared by bodies huddled close under sagging thatch. In those rough cottages, there were no plush mattresses or feather-stuffed duvets, no memory foam to cradle tired limbs. There was only straw, piled thick and uneven on dirt floors, a thin buffer between shivering skin and the frozen earth. The nights were long, and the cold crept in like a sly thief. It slipped through cracks in the walls, whistled under warped doors, settled heavy on breath and bone. But the peasants had learned, in winter, there was no room for pride. Warmth came from closeness. So they slept together, not just husband and wife, but children, grandparents, even the odd neighbor or farmhand too far from home, a human quilt, pieced together from shared need and quiet trust. The children curled in the center, soft and small, breathing slow. The elders, brittle-boned and wise, lay near the hearth, where the embers glowed low and red. The strong ones, mothers, fathers, broad-backed uncles, took the outer edges, shielding the rest from drafts that fingered at the blankets. A cow or goat might be tethered close to the wall, its warm breath a gentle fog in the icy air. A dog nosed its way under blankets, tail wagging, content to join the tangle of limbs and blankets. There was no room for secrets in that pile of straw and bodies. Elbows knocked, feet tangled, someone's breath always too warm, someone else's toes always too cold. But no one complained. They pressed closer, letting the shared heat seep into weary bones. The fire was banked at night, a careful mound of coals under ash, coaxed to last until dawn. Still, the cold found them. When it did, they shifted in the dark, a wordless dance of bodies seeking shelter in each other's nearness. Maybe you've felt it. Friend, that deep, quiet comfort of another heartbeat close. In those small homes, the cold taught them to find safety in each other's presence, to share warmth without question, to trust that another's breath was as vital as their own. And if sleep was thin and restless, if the wind rattled the walls and the straw crackled under shifting weight, they did not curse the night. They held fast to the small, shared warmth, and let the darkness pass. Tonight, as you snuggle under your blanket, remember them, those who learned that survival was not about fighting the cold alone. It was about weaving together, breath to breath, until the dawn crept back in. If you're listening, tell me, have you ever known a night like that? A night when warmth was more than heat, but the hush of voices, the weight of a loved one's arm draped across your shoulder. Leave me a note. Friend, let's share those quiet memories and keep the embers of that old warmth alive. Stay cozy, stay warm, and let your heart remember what it feels like to sleep surrounded by love. Find your porch swing. Friend, let the hush of the evening settle around you like an old quilt. Tonight, we'll slip back into those cold nights, where every breath was a small rebellion against the icy dark, where hope flickered low, but never went out. The peasants learned that survival wasn't just about layering ragged cloaks or banking the fire. It was about grit, the stubborn marrow-deep refusal to give in. In those nights, they worked small magics, packing moss into the worst drafts, tucking old cloth into cracks where the wind howled. Each patch, each handful of straw was a prayer for the dawn. Food was a promise too. At night, they ate heavy, thick stews that clung to ribs, barley, turnips, a scrap of salted meat if luck was kind. They knew the secret: fill your belly, and the heat inside would keep you breathing until morning. A belly full of warmth was a shield against the cold. And they shared because they had to. The village was a single lung, breathing together in the bitter air. If one fire died, a neighbor would share their coals. If one roof sagged, rough hands would mend it, not because it was charity, but because tomorrow it might be their own roof that failed. In the hush of those nights, hope was a small thing. It was the glow of a coal banked safe under ash. It was the hush of voices telling stories in the dark, of saints and spirits, of warm fields waiting for spring. It was a father's quiet voice promising his children that the sun would come back. And so they endured, one breath at a time, one patch of moss at a time, one warm bowl of stew at a time. They didn't dream of riches or glory. They dreamed of waking up with all their fingers and toes, of feeling the weak sun's warmth on their faces, if only for a moment. Maybe you felt it too, friend. That flicker of stubbornness when the night grows long. That small voice in your chest that says, hold on, the light will return. It's an old instinct, older than any kingdom or crown. If you're listening tonight, let that old instinct settle in your bones. Breathe slow. Trust the warmth in your belly, the hush in your home, and know that the peasants who came before us, those rough, brave souls, are whispering through the years. You are stronger than the cold. Tell me, friend, what's your ritual when winter winds rattle your window panes? Do you sip something hot? Wrap yourself in a quilt that smells of cedar? Or do you simply sit, hush your breath, and trust the dawn? Leave me a note. Let's keep these quiet stories alive together. A small rebellion against the dark, one soft breath at a time. Find your softest blanket. Friend, pull it close and let's sit together. Just for a while. The night air is cold. But tonight, we'll share a story of warmth, the hush of the hearth, the glow of ember, and the gentle company of one another. Picture a small wooden hut, its walls thin as paper, battered by winds that roar like an ancient spirit. Inside, a single fire pit, dug shallow into the dirt, sends up wavering fingers of flame. This isn't a grand fireplace with polished stones or iron grates. It's a simple hearth, little more than a ring of rocks, but it holds the kind of light that can chase shadows from the soul. The peasants of that time knew the fire was more than just heat. It was life. Each evening, as the sun sank behind the hills and the frost crept in, they'd gather close around it, their faces ruddy from the cold, their shoulders draped in patched cloaks that smelled of earth and sheep's wool. They didn't mind the smell. It was the smell of survival. The crackle of burning wood was music, a low song that filled the room with promise. Sparks drifted up like tiny stars, lost in the drifting smoke. Children watched them with wide eyes, cheeks pink from the heat. They'd sit cross-legged, clutching mugs of thin soup, feeling the warm steam kiss their lips. The older folk would lean back, eyes half closed, as memories stirred in the glow of the coals. Stories of other winters, of harder nights and sudden thaws, rose up like embers from a dying log. There were tales of wolves that prowled the forest's edge, of lost travellers who stumbled into the warmth of a stranger's fire. And in every story, a thread of hope. A reminder that even the coldest night must end. Sometimes, the fire flickered low, the logs burned down to glowing stones. Then, in the hush, someone would slip outside, bare feet crunching across the frozen yard, to fetch another armful of wood. They moved quickly, breath fogging in the air, each step an oath against the dark, because to let the fire die was to let winter win. Inside, others tended to the embers, banking them carefully, stirring the ash just so. They knew the trick. Pile the ash high, trap the coals beneath, and in the morning, the fire would be waiting. It was a ritual, quiet and sure, a dance between human hands and the ancient breath of flame. The wind would rattle the shutters, sneak icy fingers through every crack, but the peasants pressed closer together, sharing warmth in the flickering light. Mothers wrapped children in wool blankets, pulled them onto their laps. Grandfathers clapped thick mittens together, muttering that the cold only bit those who let it. Some nights, the fire seemed to hold back more than just the cold. It held back the fear, the loneliness that winter could bring. They'd sit shoulder to shoulder, knees touching, and in the soft red glow, Each breath was a promise. We are still here. We are still warm, in that small circle of light. Chores paused. Hands that had spent the day hauling wood or turning soil rested, cupped around mugs of broth. Feet that had trudged through snow, wrapped in rags and old shoes. Finally still, the room smelled of smoke and straw, of old soup and tallow candles. It wasn't a rich perfume, but it was a comfort. Children played games in the corner, their laughter rising and falling like the sparks. They stacked bits of wood into tiny castles, or traced shapes in the soot along the walls. A father might lean down, ruffle a child's hair. And for a moment, even the harsh winter outside softened. Above the hearth, herbs hung drying, sage, thyme, a few sprigs of lavender, their scent faint in the smoky air. These were tokens of life's small pleasures, reminders that spring would come again. A pot of turnip stew simmered over the flames, thin but fragrant, each mouthful a little warmth to carry deeper into the night. And when the fire banked low, someone would begin to hum, a low tune, ancient as the land itself. Winding through the hush, voices joined in, soft and sure, weaving melody with the crackle of the fire. In that small room, they made a new kind of warmth, one no cold wind could ever steal. The night was long, the cold relentless, but the fire's glow was patient. Each log, each breath, each shared song was a defiance, a quiet stand against the darkness. And when sleep came, it came easy, curling in the lap of that tender glow. As you listen to this story, friend, let it warm the corners of your own heart. Think of the small fires you've tended, a candle by the window, a pot of soup on the stove, the hush of loved ones close. These are the embers we bank against winter. These are the stories we share. So the dark never wins. Tell me, what keeps your fire alive? Leave a word, a whisper of your own memory, in the comments below. Let's build this quiet circle together, a soft place to rest, a light that never fades. Find your favorite chair. Let your shoulders drop. Tonight, we're gathering around an old wooden table, its surface worn smooth by countless meals and quiet stories. Outside, the wind sighs across the yard. Inside, there's the gentle clink of tin spoons and the soft rustle of blankets pulled closer. The meal is simple, a pot of stew, thick with root vegetables, bubbles on the hearth. Potatoes, turnips, and a handful of carrots, all pulled from the cold earth weeks ago. A rabbit, caught by deft hands in the woods, simmers slowly. The scent of broth fills the air, a warm balm against the winter chill. The family gathers close around the table, heads bowed in thanks, rough hands, calloused from chopping wood and tending fields, cradle-chipped bowls like small treasures. Steam curls up, fogging cracked windows. Someone cracks the crusty heel of bread in half, handing it across the table, an unspoken kindness in the gesture. There's no feast of silver platters here, no rich sauces or fancy dishes, but each bite carries the comfort of something earned, the taste of labor, of days spent breaking the frozen soil, of long nights sewing patches into old coats. The stew warms their bellies. But more than that, it warms their hearts. In the flickering light, faces glow gentle and open. Lines of worry ease as spoons tap softly against the bowl's rim. Children giggle between mouthfuls, cheeks pink from the heat. A mother tucks an escaped lock of hair behind her ear, eyes bright with pride at the meal she coaxed from so little. The father, shoulders broad as the barn door, eats in slow, careful mouthfuls, each spoonful a pause, each chew a measure of gratitude. He glances out the window from time to time, watching the shadows shift in the yard, listening for the moan of the wind. But here, in this pool of lamplight, the cold stays outside. A dog lies by the hearth, paws twitching in some quiet dream. The children sneak bits of bread beneath the table, giggling as the dog's tail thumps in sleepy thanks. Above them, bundles of dried herbs sway gently in the draughts, their faint scent of sage and rosemary mingling with the rich stew. The grandfather clears his throat. A story's coming. You can tell by the twinkle in his eye. The way he leans back in his chair, he speaks of winters long past, of nights when the snow piled high against the door, of times when there was only turnip soup, thin and pale, but somehow they still found laughter. His voice rumbles low, steady as the crackle of the fire. The children lean forward, drawn in by the story. Even the youngest, fists wrapped tight around a spoon, listens with wide eyes. Outside, the wind sighs and rattles, but here inside, the story holds them all together. Someone refills the pot with hot water, stretching the stew for one more bowl. The thin broth is still enough, because in the sharing, there is more than enough. A girl with braids tucked behind her ears hums a soft tune, the melody weaving between the stories and the hush of spoons. The night deepens. The shadows in the corners grow softer. Not as sharp, laughter rises in gentle waves, like the flicker of the fire. No one's in a hurry. The meal stretches on, slow and easy, a kind of quiet celebration. A boy, no more than 8, asks about spring. Will the fields be ready? He wonders, his voice small but sure. His father nods, slow and certain, always. The earth rests now, but she'll wake. She always does. In the hush that follows, each person seems to breathe a little easier. The meal, the stories, the small hopes for what's to come, they knit together like a patchwork quilt. Even the dog seems to sigh in his sleep. A soft exhale that sounds like peace. The mother gathers the bowls, stacking them carefully to wash later. The father leans back, boots crossed at the ankles, and stares into the low, steady glow of the hearth. The children are yawning, blinking slowly. Full of food and the comfort of being together, the wind still prowls outside. But here, there's warmth, the glow of the hearth, the gentle hush of voices telling stories, the quiet scrape of spoons, the small weight of a child's head against a mother's shoulder. The cold can wait, so let this be a soft place for you tonight. 2. A story shared, a meal remembered. In the hush of winter, these simple things, a bowl of stew, a warm lap, a promise of spring are enough. If you're listening now, friend, I hope you're warm. Wherever you are, tell me, what's your comfort food on a winter's night? Leave me a note. Let's keep this circle glowing. One story at a time. Find your coziest chair. Let your shoulders relax. Tonight, we're drifting into the quiet dreams of those who wander, of those who walk the long, silent roads of winter nights. The moon hangs low, a pale coin in a dark sky. It spills its soft glow across the fields, turning the snow into a gentle sea of silver. There's a hush in the world, the kind that comes when the wind holds its breath. And in that hush, a pair of boots crunch along the narrow path, leaving a trail of prints in the fresh snow. The man walks with slow, measured steps. His coat is patched at the elbows, his hat pulled low, a scarf, knit by a patient hand long ago, wraps snug around his neck. His breath clouds in the cold, small ghosts that vanish in the starlight. He's been walking since dusk, miles behind him, miles to go, but there's no hurry. Each step is steady. The quiet rhythm of a man who knows the road is as much a part of life as the destination. At his feet, the snow squeaks, soft and sure. The night air smells of pine and distant smoke. Somewhere, a fire still burns. He tucks his hands into his pockets, fingers wrapped around the last of the warmth from his coat. And he thinks of home, not a grand home, no, just a small cabin tucked at the edge of a frozen creek. A place where a rocking chair waits by the window, where a quilt rests across the bed like a promise, a place of soft lamplight and warm bread, of quiet nights and gentle mornings. But tonight, he's a wanderer, and there's a strange kind of freedom in that. The moon, the road, the soft hush of the snow, they're all his. No walls, no roof to hold him in, only the wide, open world and the steady beat of his own footsteps. He passes a stand of bare birch trees, their white trunks ghostly in the moonlight. They creak in the wind, a slow, wooden song. He tips his hat to them, a small nod of respect. The night is old, and he is its guest. In his pocket, he carries a small tin of coffee grounds, a flint and steel, and a scrap of dried meat, enough to make a fire if he finds the right place, enough to make it through the night. He hums a tune as he walks, low and soft, a song his mother used to sing by the hearth. The notes rise and fall like the hills around him, blending with the sigh of the wind. The song is a memory, a soft thread tying him to a past that still glows warm in his heart. After a mile or so, he comes to an old barn, half sunk into the snowdrifts. The door hangs off its hinges, but inside, there's shelter from the wind. He pushes it open, the wood groaning softly, and steps into the darkness. The air inside smells of old hay and dust. He finds a patch of straw in the corner, dry enough to bed down for a while. He sets his small pack beside him, pulls the blanket tighter around his shoulders. In the dark, he closes his eyes and lets the quiet settle. The barn creaks and sighs with the wind, a lullaby in wood and stone. He drifts, halfway between sleep and waking, and dreams of warm fires and gentle voices. He dreams of a porch swing, swaying softly in the summer air, of a dog curled at his feet, tail thumping slow against the floorboards. of a pie cooling on the windowsill, the scent of cinnamon and apple wrapping around him like a blanket. These are the dreams of a wanderer, soft, steady, and bright against the night, dreams that glow warm even in the coldest dark. When he wakes, the moon has moved on, and the night has deepened. He sits up, feeling the stiffness in his bones, the ache in his legs, but there's no complaint in his heart, only the quiet knowing that this is enough, that the road will still be there in the morning. He pulls his boots on, ties the laces snug. He steps back into the night, the cold brushing his face like an old friend. The barn behind him, the moon above, the world still sleeping all around. As he walks on, he leaves a line of footprints behind him, a soft trail through the snow, a quiet testimony to a journey still unfolding. So if you're listening tonight, friend, tell me, where would you wander? If you could, what quiet road calls your name in the hush of winter? Leave me a note. Let's keep this gentle fire of stories burning, one soft dream at a time. Find a soft blanket, wrap it around your shoulders. Let your eyes grow heavy as I tell you this quiet story. A story about the warmth we carry. Even in the coldest nights, the man walks on, the barn fading behind him. The snow still crunches under his boots, each step a quiet beat in the hush of the night. His breath drifts ahead in soft clouds, and he pulls his scarf higher to catch the chill. There's a glow ahead, faint, flickering. He narrows his eyes, his heart quickening. A farmhouse, maybe, a cabin, somewhere to rest, somewhere to borrow a little warmth. He follows the light. It's not close, but it's there, steady, like a small promise in the darkness. As he draws nearer, the glow grows stronger. A small cabin sits at the edge of a clearing, smoke rising from its chimney. The windows spill soft, golden light onto the snow, like warm honey in the cold night. He pauses at the edge of the yard. There's an old wooden fence, the slats worn smooth by years of winter wind. He rests a hand on the top rail, feeling the cold bite of the wood under his fingers. In the window, he sees a figure, a woman, moving slowly around the room. She sets a kettle on the stove, the fire inside crackling bright. She doesn't see him, but he watches a moment longer, drawn by the simple grace of her movements. Then he steps back from the fence, breathes deep. This is not his home, not his fire, but he can't help but feel the pull, the ache for warmth, for shelter, for a soft chair by the hearth. He thinks of the coffee tin in his pocket, the flint and steel, the small scrap of meat, enough to make a small meal, but nothing like the feast of comfort waiting inside that cabin. A choice lingers in his chest, to knock, to ask for shelter, or to pass by, letting the warmth remain a promise he never claims. He hesitates, the snow falling soft around him. Then he lifts his hand, knocking gently on the wooden door. Inside, the woman looks up, startled. For a moment, silence. Then she opens the door, the light spilling out to meet him. Evening. Ma'am, he says, his voice low and gentle. Would you mind if I borrowed a bit of your fire, just to warm my hands before I carry on? She looks him up and down, the worn coat, the weary eyes. Then she steps aside, wordless, and he steps into the glow. The cabin is small, but it smells of bread and pine. The fire snaps in the hearth, filling the air with gentle warmth. He holds his hands out to it, feeling the ache in his fingers ease. The woman doesn't speak at first. She pours a cup of coffee from the kettle, sets it on the table for him. He nods his thanks, wrapping his hands around the mug. The heat seeps into his palms, his bones, his chest. For a long moment, they say nothing. The only sounds are the crackle of the fire, the soft ticking of a clock on the wall. Then she says, "Cold night for travelling." Her voice is kind, a soft hush that matches the quiet of the cabin. He nods. It is, but the road called. So I followed. She sits across from him, her hands folded in her lap. The firelight paints her face in warm gold. She looks at him, and he sees no fear, no suspicion, only a quiet understanding. Not many come this way, she says. He smiles. Just a flicker. Not many have reason to, I suppose. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the old shutters. But inside, the air is still, the warmth wrapping around them like a soft blanket. He tells her a little of his journey, of the miles he's walked, the barns he's slept in, the quiet dreams that keep him company. She listens, her eyes bright, and he feels the weight of the road ease. Just a little. She pours him another cup of coffee, sets a small plate of bread and butter beside it. He eats slowly, savoring each bite like a small blessing. When the meal is done, he stands. Thank you, ma'am, he says. I won't take more of your kindness. She shakes her head. It's a cold night. There's a blanket by the hearth. You're welcome to it. For a moment, he hesitates, but the blanket calls to him. The promise of warmth, of rest. He nods, and she smiles. He lays the blanket out near the fire, its wool soft and worn. He settles down, feeling the heat of the flames on his face, the gentle hush of the night outside. The woman dims the lamps, and the cabin falls into a soft glow. He closes his eyes, the warmth of the fire and the kindness of a stranger carrying him into sleep. And as he drifts off, he thinks of the road still waiting. But for tonight, he has found a small harbour of light, a quiet place to rest. If you're still listening, friend, tell me, where do you find your warmth on a winter's night? Is it a hearth, a memory, a friend's gentle smile? Leave me a note. Let's keep these soft stories alive. Together, find a spot where you can rest easy, maybe in a cozy chair or under a warm blanket. Let your breath slow and your thoughts grow quiet as we wander together into this next chapter of the story. When the man woke, the first light of dawn was pushing at the edges of the cabin windows. The world outside was still. The snow lay in thick drifts, unbroken, soft as a feather bed. He sat up slowly, the blanket slipping from his shoulders. The fire had burned down to embers, but they still glowed a gentle red in the hearth. He stirred them with a stick, coaxing a few bright sparks from the coals. The woman was already up, moving about the small kitchen. She had a kettle on the stove, steam curling in the pale morning light. Coffee's almost ready, she said without turning around. Her voice was soft, like the light filtering through the frosty window panes. He nodded. Grateful, he took in the small room, the worn table, the rocking chair by the window, a row of mason jars filled with preserves. It was a place of quiet labour and quiet joys, and he felt a tenderness bloom in his chest. He wrapped the blanket tighter around his shoulders and stepped out onto the porch. The cold bit at his skin, but the air smelled clean and new. The world was hushed, painted in silver and blue. The trees stood still, their branches draped in snow. In the distance, the mountains rose, their peaks sharp and white against the pale sky. He drew a breath and let it out slow, feeling the cold air clear his head. The road lay ahead, waiting, but in that moment, he let the quiet of the dawn wash over him. He thought of the miles he'd already travelled, the long nights, the empty barns, the quiet desperation that sometimes crept in around the edges. And he thought of this small cabin, the gentle warmth of a stranger's kindness. He stepped back inside, the door creaking softly. The woman handed him a mug of coffee, her hands wrapped around her own. They stood in silence, sipping the hot, dark liquid. Finally, he set his mug down. Thank you, he said, his voice low, for the fire, the food, the bed, for everything. She nodded, her eyes kind. Safe travels, she said. And if you ever find yourself back this way, the door's always open. He smiled, a quiet thing that warmed his face. I'll remember. He gathered his things, the small bundle of food she pressed into his hands, the blanket folded neatly under his arm. He stepped out into the dawn, the snow crunching softly beneath his boots. The world was waking, the sun rising slow, turning the snow to gold. He felt the weight of the road ahead, but he also felt a quiet certainty in his chest. He walked on, the morning light at his back. Each step was a promise of miles to go, of stories yet to find, of kindness waiting in unexpected places. Maybe that's what kept him moving, not the road itself, but the hope of light in the darkness, of coffee in a warm kitchen, of a blanket offered without question. As he turned down the road, he paused to look back at the cabin. The smoke rose steady from the chimney, a small sign of life in the silent world. Then he turned his face to the morning and set off, his breath rising in the cold air, each step a quiet testament to the soft strength of the heart. And if you're still here, friend, still listening, tell me about a time someone's kindness found you when you needed it most. Leave me a note, a word, a memory, so we can share the warmth of these stories together. Find your warmest blanket, settle back into your favorite chair, let the world outside slip away, and come along on this next part of our quiet journey. The man's boots crunched steadily on the packed snow, the morning sun slipping through the bare branches overhead. He'd walked for hours, past fields dusted with white, past old fences leaning under the weight of the cold. He moved slow, steady, careful not to lose the rhythm of his breath. By midday, the sky had turned a soft blue. He stopped at a small stream that cut across the road. water still flowing beneath a thin skin of ice. He crouched there, cupping the cold water in his hands, feeling the bite of it on his skin. He thought of the woman at the cabin, her gentle voice, the soft hush of the coffee brewing in the quiet morning, and he felt a flicker of warmth, a memory he could carry with him as he walked. The road turned, leading him up a gentle slope. At the top of the rise, he saw a small gas station, a single pump, an old sign that creaked in the breeze. It was the kind of place you might miss if you weren't looking. He stepped inside, the bell over the door chiming a soft note. The warmth hit him first, the smell of coffee and motor oil, the dusty shelves lined with cans and jars. A man stood behind the counter, reading a newspaper. "Morning," the man said. Glancing up, the stranger nodded back, offering a quiet smile. "Cold out there," the shopkeeper said, folding his paper. "Coffee's fresh if you want some." The stranger nodded again, his voice low. "Thanks. I'd appreciate that." He took the mug the man offered, holding it in both hands. The heat seeped into his fingers, a small comfort that went deeper than the skin. They talked a little. The weather, the road conditions, the stories of travelers who'd come through before. The shopkeeper's voice was soft and even, like the hum of a warm engine on a winter morning. The stranger listened. Nodding now and then, he let the words wash over him. The easy talk of a man who'd seen enough winters to know how to keep warm, how to keep moving. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the windows in their frames. The stranger sipped his coffee slowly, feeling the warmth spread through his chest. He noticed a small bulletin board by the door, notes pinned up, handbills for lost dogs, and a flyer for a local pancake breakfast. He paused, reading the words, the small stories of this place he'd stumbled into. People still come together, he thought. Even in the cold, in the hush of winter, there was a gentle weaving of lives, notes on a board, cups of coffee shared in quiet gas stations. When he finished his cup, he thanked the man behind the counter. "Safe travels," the shopkeeper said. The stranger nodded, pulling his coat tighter around him. He stepped outside, the wind sharp against his face, but he felt steadier somehow, as though the warmth of the coffee and the easy talk had lent him a little of the shopkeeper's quiet strength. He walked on, the sun slipping lower in the sky. The road stretched ahead, white and empty, but he no longer felt quite so alone. Maybe that's the way of winter journeys. A warm cup, a kind word, a stranger's nod, small things, but enough to keep the cold at bay for another mile. As the day turned to dusk, he thought of the stories he'd carry from this place. The quiet voices, the soft clink of mugs on a counter, the simple kindness of a man who kept the coffee hot for those who needed it. And maybe, somewhere down the road, he'd find another place like this. Another station, another gentle voice to remind him that the road was never empty. Not really. If this part of the story warms your heart, let me know in the comments below. Tell me about a roadside stop that made your journey easier. A smile, a coffee, a quiet moment that stayed with you. Find a soft blanket to wrap around your shoulders. Take a deep breath. Let it out slow. The night is cold, but there's a fire waiting for us in this next chapter. As the sun dipped below the hills, the man came to a small clearing by the road. There, tucked back against a stand of pines, was a cabin, small and weathered, smoke curling from the chimney. He paused, boots crunching softly on the frozen ground. For a moment, he just stood there, watching the soft glow of the window, a promise of warmth in the deepening blue of night. He knocked gently on the door. A woman opened it, older than he, her eyes bright with a kindness that spoke of years spent listening, of stories told by firelight. "Come in," she said, stepping back to let him pass. The air inside smelled of wood smoke and something sweet, apples, maybe, simmering on the stove. He thanked her with a nod, stepping into the glow of the hearth. The room was small, just a table, 2 chairs, and a rocking chair pulled up close to the fire. She handed him a mug, warm and fragrant, apple cider, she said. "It's been a long winter, but this helps chase the chill away." He took a careful sip, feeling the heat spread through him. The cider was sweet and sharp, a comfort that tasted like autumn, like orchards and crisp leaves and sun-warmed afternoons. The woman moved around the small kitchen, her steps sure and steady. She hummed softly to herself, the melody low and gentle. He watched the fire flicker in the hearth, the way the light played on the rough-hewn beams of the ceiling. For a moment, the world outside seemed far away, just the hush of the snow and the steady breath of the flames. She sat with him then, folding her hands in her lap. Traveling alone, she asked. He nodded. Sometimes that's the only way, he said softly. She didn't press for more. Instead, she told him about the orchard her father had tended, how the apples in the cellar still smelled of summer, about the old roads winding through these hills, and the people who came and went with the turning of the seasons. Her voice was soft, the words like the crackle of the fire, gentle, steady, and warm. He listened, sipping the cider, letting her stories fill the quiet. He thought of the miles he'd walked, the frozen rivers and empty fields, and how this small cabin felt like a pause, a soft breath in the long cold night. When she rose to add another log to the fire, he caught a glimpse of a quilt folded on the back of the rocking chair. It was patchworked in colours that reminded him of autumn. Gold, russet, soft brown, each square a memory, he thought, a story stitched into cloth. You sleep here tonight, she said, her voice firm but kind. There's a bed in the corner. The snow's deep and the wolves are restless. It's no night to be out there alone. He started to protest, but she shook her head, her eyes bright in the firelight. No one should be out on a night like this, she said. And besides, it's nice to have company. So he stayed. He stretched out on the small bed, the quilt pulled up to his chin. He listened to the fire pop and hiss, the wind sighing around the cabin. She moved quietly through the room, tending the fire, humming softly. In the hush of that small cabin, he felt the weariness slip from his bones, the road and the cold fading for a while. Outside, the snow fell in a slow, gentle drift, each flake catching the glow of the lantern by the window. He watched them until his eyes grew heavy, the soft hum of the woman's voice lulling him into sleep. In the heart of winter, with the wind howling beyond the door, he found a small island of warmth. Abepluotrong gem, a kindness that asked for nothing but offered everything. Maybe that's the quiet gift of winter, the small fires we find along the way, and the strangers who share them with us. If this part of the story brings you a little warmth, leave me a note below. Tell me about a night you found shelter, or a kindness that carried you through. Let's keep the glow of these stories alive together. When you're ready, I'll be waiting to share the next chapter. Until then, may the glow of the hearth keep you warm tonight. Take a slow breath with me. Feel the softness of the blanket around your shoulders. There's a hush in the night. Let's step into it together. The morning came quiet, wrapped in a fog of white. Snow had fallen all through the night, thick and soft, leaving the world blank and still. The man woke to the gentle creak of the cabin door. The woman was already up, her breath a soft cloud in the cold air. She was stacking wood by the stove, her movements sure and steady. He rose from the bed, pulling the quilt tight around his shoulders. The floor was cold under his feet, but the scent of fresh coffee and wood smoke was enough to warm him. She smiled when she saw him. "Good morning," she said. "Coffee's on the stove. The snow's deep, but the road's still there, waiting." He poured a mug, the steam curling in the cold. Outside, the world was hushed and white, the trees heavy with snow. He sipped, feeling the heat seep into him, and watched the woman move through the room, her steps as quiet as the snow falling outside. "You'll be heading out today?" she asked, her voice gentle. He nodded. "I've got a long way still," he said, though the thought of the empty road and the endless white made his shoulders heavy. She looked at him for a long moment, then reached for something by the door, a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Here," she said, "bread, a bit of cheese, some dried apples. It's not much, but it'll help on the road." He took it with both hands, feeling the weight of her kindness. "Thank you," he said softly. She just nodded, a small smile at the corner of her mouth. He stepped outside, the snow crunching under his boots. The cold bit at his cheeks, but the quiet was beautiful, the way the world seemed to hold its breath, every sound muffled and soft. He looked back at the cabin, the smoke still rising from the chimney. In the window, he saw the woman wave once, then turn back to her stove. He set his feet on the road, the bundle of food tucked into his coat. Each step left a mark in the snow, small signs of his passing. Bright and clean against the white, the road wound through the trees, past fences half buried in drifts, past fields sleeping under the weight of winter. As he walked, he thought of the warmth of the cabin, the hum of the fire, the soft rustle of the quilt, the gentle kindness of a stranger. He let those memories settle in his chest, like small flames to carry him forward. The snow was deep, but he kept moving, his breath a steady rhythm in the quiet. He passed an old fence post, the wood grey and worn, and paused to rest a moment. The world was still, save for the soft sigh of the wind through the pines. He remembered something the woman had said as he stepped out the door. No matter how far you go, you're never really alone. There's always someone out there, waiting to share a bit of warmth. He smiled at that, even as the wind stung his face. He thought of the footprints he was leaving. Each step a small promise that he was still here, still moving forward. Maybe that's what winter asks of us, to keep walking, even when the world seems empty and cold, to trust that somewhere ahead, there's another fire, another warm place, waiting to welcome us in. The snow fell soft around him, a quiet hymn that wrapped the world in white. He walked on, the bundle of bread and cheese pressed close to his chest. Each step is a small act of hope. When he paused again, he looked back at the path he'd made, a winding line of footprints stretching behind him. It was a simple thing, but it made him smile. Proof that he was still here, still moving, still alive. He took another breath, the cold sharp in his lungs. Then he set his eyes forward and stepped into the hush of the snow, trusting that somewhere ahead, the road would turn toward another warm light, another quiet kindness. If this part of the story brought you a little comfort tonight, let me know in the comments. Tell me about the small kindnesses you've found on your journey. Let's keep each other warm, even on the coldest nights. Find a soft blanket and let your feet rest for a while. The wind is whispering tonight. And I have another chapter for you. He walked for miles that morning, the snow crunching softly under his boots. The world was a quiet canvas, white hills, bare branches, and the long stretch of road ahead. By midday, the sky had begun to clear. A pale sun pushed through the clouds, casting a thin silver light over the snow. He paused to watch it, letting the light warm his face, even if only a little. The bundle of bread and cheese in his coat was a comfort, a small weight that reminded him of the woman's gentle smile. He took it out as he reached a small clearing, a place where the snow had been swept clean by the wind. Sitting on an old tree stump, he unwrapped the cloth. The bread was firm and fragrant, the cheese creamy and cool. He ate slowly, savoring each bite. The way the bread felt solid in his hands, the way the cheese melted on his tongue. As he chewed, he listened to the wind sigh through the pines. It was a low hum, almost like a voice, soft and patient, like someone telling an old story. He remembered the woman's words. No matter how far you go, there's always someone out there, waiting to share a bit of warmth. Maybe it was the wind that carried those words, he thought. Maybe it was the memory of every hand that had offered help, every stranger who'd shared their fire. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the wind brush over his face. In the hush of that moment, he felt something shift inside, a quiet knowing that he was part of something larger than himself. He finished his meal, wrapped the cloth carefully, and tucked it back into his coat. Then he stood and looked out at the road again. Ahead, the land dipped down into a hollow where a small creek cut through the snow. He could see the shimmer of water, a thin line of silver beneath the ice. He felt a pull in his chest, a need to see it up close, to touch something alive. He followed the sound of the water, his breath puffing in the cold air. The snow here was softer, the ground uneven beneath his boots. He moved carefully, each step deliberate, until he reached the creek's edge. The water sang in the hush of the snow, a soft murmur that felt like a lullaby. He crouched down, dipping his gloved fingers into the icy flow. It stung, but it woke something in him, a spark that chased away the weariness. He thought of the stories he'd heard by other fires, of rivers that carried dreams, of water that remembered every footstep, every voice. Maybe this creek had a story of its own, a song that rose with the wind and carried hope to those who listened. He sat for a while by the water, feeling the cold creep through his coat. But he didn't mind. The sound of the creek, the hush of the snow, it was enough to keep his heart steady. When he finally rose, he looked back once more. The wind had smoothed away his footprints, but he didn't feel lost. Every breath, every step forward, they were their own kind of map. He turned back to the road, the creek's song still echoing in his ears. As he walked, he let that song guide him, a promise that even the coldest days can be warmed by the quiet music of moving water. The sun began to dip again, the sky turning soft shades of pink and gold. He walked on, the hush of the snow and the hum of the wind carrying him forward. Each step felt like a small prayer, a promise to keep going, no matter how far. When he reached the next bend in the road, he paused to watch the sun sink behind the hills. He let the cold settle around him, and in that moment, he wasn't afraid. The road was long, but the wind was kind, and the creek's song was still in his heart. As night fell, he found a small stand of trees to shelter in. He wrapped the blanket around his shoulders, let the cold air fill his lungs, and watched the first stars appear. Maybe there's a quiet lesson here, he thought, that in the hush of the snow, in the song of the wind, we find the gentle echoes of every kindness we've known. If this chapter brings you a sense of calm tonight, let me know. Tell me how the winter sings to you and how you keep your own fires burning. I'll be here to share the next part of the journey when you're ready. Until then, let the wind's song keep you company, and let the hush of the snow be your gentle blanket. Settle into your chair, pull that blanket a little closer. The night is deep and quiet, and there's another piece of this story waiting for you. The sun had disappeared completely now, leaving only a faint glow on the western horizon. He walked carefully, his boots sinking into the snow, each step a soft crunch in the stillness. Ahead, he saw the flicker of light, a warm, pulsing glow that danced like a promise. A small cabin, smoke curling from the chimney, a single window lit with the hush of a fire. He paused, taking in the sight. The cold had bitten deep, but here was warmth, a place of rest, a moment of peace. He approached slowly, his breath rising in silver clouds. When he reached the porch, he knocked lightly on the wooden door. The sound was gentle, like a question whispered into the winter night. The door opened, and an older man stood there, his face weathered and kind. A soft scarf was wrapped around his neck, and his eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "Come in," the man said, his voice a soft rumble. "You look like you've been chasing the wind all day." He stepped inside, and the warmth of the fire washed over him. The room was small but cozy, rough wooden beams overhead, the scent of cedar and old stories in the air. A pot of stew simmered on the stove, filling the room with a rich, comforting smell. The man gestured to a chair near the fire, and he sank into it gratefully, letting the heat seep into his bones. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled softly, the only sound in the hush of the night. The man handed him a cup of tea, steaming, fragrant with mint and something sweet. He took a sip, feeling the warmth flow through him, and let out a soft sigh. The man watched him with a knowing smile. "It's a cold night," he said, his voice gentle, "but the fire's strong, and the stew is ready. There's always room for one more at this table." He nodded, feeling a quiet gratitude settle in his chest. Outside, the wind still howled. But here, in this small cabin, there was only peace. They ate in companionable silence. The stew was thick and hearty, tender pieces of meat, sweet carrots, earthy potatoes. Each bite was a reminder of comfort, of the way food can be a kind of home. After the meal, they sat by the fire, the glow flickering over their faces. The older man told stories of winters past, of nights spent by the fire with family and friends. His voice was low and steady, like the hum of the wind outside. Each word was a soft thread, weaving warmth into the night. He listened, letting the stories wash over him. They were simple tales, of chopping wood, of fishing in the creek, of laughter shared around an old oak table. But in their simplicity, there was something profound, a reminder that even in the harshest winters, there is always a place for kindness, for a smile shared in the dark. At one point, the older man leaned back in his chair and looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said softly, "sometimes it's the smallest light that keeps us going. A candle in the window, a smile in the dark." He thought of all the miles he had walked, the cold nights spent alone, and he realized that this moment of warmth, of shared quiet, was what he had been searching for all along. The older man stood and added another log to the fire. The flames leapt higher, casting long shadows on the walls. "Stay as long as you need," the man said. "The road will still be there in the morning, but tonight, let the fire keep you." He nodded, feeling the weight of the miles slip from his shoulders. For tonight, there was no need to wander. The fire was enough, and the night was gentle. He let his eyes close, the warmth of the fire and the older man's stories lulling him into a soft drowse. The wind outside was still, the hush of snow a blanket that wrapped around the cabin. Maybe there's a quiet lesson here, he thought, that even the smallest light can be a beacon in the dark, a promise that warmth still waits somewhere. If you're listening tonight, let this story be a soft place to rest. And if you found a warm fire of your own, let me know. Tell me how you keep the cold at bay, and how the quiet of winter sings to you. Tomorrow, we'll walk a little further together. But tonight, let the glow of the fire keep you safe, and let your dreams be gentle. Find your spot, Pull that blanket a little tighter. The night is waiting, and this is the final chapter of our quiet journey. The morning came soft and pale, light sliding through the small window like a gentle promise. He opened his eyes slowly, feeling the warmth of the room, the hush of the world outside. The old man was already at the stove, stirring a pot of oatmeal. The smell of cinnamon and maple syrup filled the air, sweet and comforting. "Morning," the man said with a smile. "Hope you slept well." He nodded, stretching his arms, feeling the last traces of sleep drift away. There was something in the way the light fell across the wooden floor, something in the easy hum of the morning that felt like hope. They ate quietly, two travelers sharing a simple meal. The oatmeal was thick and creamy, a taste of home, and each bite seemed to warm him from the inside out. Outside, the snow was still deep, but the sky was clear and bright, a soft blue that promised a day of calm. He sipped his coffee, watching the way the light played across the table, the steam curling from the mug. The old man looked at him, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You've got a long road ahead," he said softly, "but there's no need to hurry. The world can wait a little while." He nodded, feeling that truth settled deep in his chest. The journey was still out there, the miles, the cold, the quiet nights. But here, in this moment, there was only warmth. He stood, pulling on his coat and scarf, the thick wool rough against his fingertips. The old man handed him a small cloth-wrapped bundle. Bread, cheese, a few slices of apple, something for the road, he said, his voice kind. "Thank you," he replied, his voice soft. The words felt simple, but they were true. A gratitude that filled every corner of his heart. They stepped onto the porch together, the cold biting at his cheeks, the snow crunching softly underfoot. The sky was bright, the sun a pale coin in the winter sky. For a moment, they stood side by side, two men wrapped in scarves and memories, the world stretching out in every direction. The old man put a hand on his shoulder, a touch light as a whisper, but strong enough to steady him. "Remember," he said, his voice quiet in the morning hush, "it's not the road that matters most. It's the warmth you carry inside you." He nodded, the words sinking in like the sun's first light. He stepped off the porch, each breath a cloud in the cold air. As he walked, he felt the bundle of food warm against his chest, the memory of the fire still flickering in his mind. The snow crunched under his boots, each step a quiet song of moving forward. He thought of the old man's smile, the soft crackle of the fire, the gentle hush of the night, and he realized that in every quiet moment, in every cup of tea shared, every story told, there was a kind of home. Maybe that's what these stories have always been about. Not just the battles, the cold, the miles of winter, but the soft lights we find along the way. A fire on a snowy night, a smile in the dark, a friend who opens their door. He paused at the edge of the yard, looking back at the small cabin, smoke still curled from the chimney, a soft thread against the sky. He raised a hand in farewell, and for a moment, he could almost feel the warmth of the fire again. Then he turned, stepping out into the white hush of the morning. The world was waiting, miles of snow, long nights, and soft dawns, but he carried the warmth of that little cabin with him, a glow that would never fade. If you've been listening to these stories, if they've brought you a little light on a winter's night, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me where you've found warmth in the cold. Tell me the stories that keep you company in the quiet hours. And when you're ready, let this final chapter rest softly in your mind. Let the snow hush the world to sleep, and let the memory of the fire keep you warm. The night is gentle, the morning is kind, and somewhere, there's always a light waiting, a promise that no matter how far we wander, there's always a place to rest. So, take a breath. Let this story be a soft place to end tonight, and know that somewhere, in a cabin tucked away in the quiet woods, the fire is still burning. As we bring this long, quiet journey to a close, let's take a moment to sit back, breathe in the hush of the night, and let the lessons of these stories settle gently around us. We wandered through snowy fields, sat beside old fires, and listened to the slow crackle of history's echoes. We've met farmers who weathered the storms of centuries past, and we've felt the hush of revolution flickering like a candle's glow. We've seen how hope can burn bright even on the coldest nights, and how the simplest acts of kindness, a bowl of soup, a shared blanket, can hold the weight of 1,000 armies. Maybe that's the real lesson tucked inside these tales. That no matter the century, no matter the battles and the miles, the warmth we share with each other, the laughter, the quiet comfort, that's what makes life worth living. In these stories of farmers, soldiers, and dreamers, there's a small, steady truth. It isn't the grand events alone that shape our lives. It's the soft hum of a porch swing on a summer evening, the hush of snow outside a window, the steady beat of a heart that knows how to keep going, even when the road is long. And so, as we close the final page of this chapter, I hope you carry that lesson with you, that the glow of a hearth is more than heat. It's hope, that every quiet cup of coffee on a frosty morning is a chance to start again. Even in the coldest winters, there's always a place to rest, a story to tell, and a friend to share it with. Tell me, friend, what quiet lights have warmed your nights? What stories have stayed with you long after the fire has died down? Let me know in the comments, or simply close your eyes and let the hush of this story carry you into sleep. Let these words be a soft blanket for your mind tonight, a promise that somewhere, someone is still tending the fire, and there's always room at the hearth for another traveler. So take a breath, let it out slow, and know that wherever you are, you're part of a long, quiet story that's still unfolding. A story of hope, of home, and of the gentle glow that never fades. If this story brought you comfort or a moment's pause, let me know. Tell me what warms your heart on these winter nights. Let's keep these stories alive together. Good night, dear listener. The fire's still burning, and you're always welcome here.